Okay, so 7 reasons why you should celebrate Purim. All right. For one, it is in the scriptures, people. It's in the scriptures. We can't throw the scriptures out. We can't pick and choose here. This is the scriptures. And for what, it's not a pagan festival. It is a festival for Israel. It is Israel's festival, okay? It is not commanded in the Torah, of course not. It's not one of the 7, but it is not just a minor holiday. This is a huge, major holiday, in my opinion, because of the subject matter that it actually begins to unpack. So it's in the book of Esther in our scriptures. It's also, the rest of the story is in the book of the Apocrypha, called the rest of the book of Esther. And in that book, you actually see the prayers of Queen Esther. You see the prayers of Mordecai. You see the prayers of the king. And Yahweh's name is all over it. Beautiful continuation of the story to understand exactly how the story went down when you have both of those together. So number 2, it happened to family. Again, like I said, it happened to our brother Judah, but we are all family. We're all one nation, right? And so to celebrate how Yahweh came through for Judah, it's like he comes through for us. It's like the same thing. We're like celebrating it because of what he did, what Yahweh did for our family. Number 3, it was actually a command for the scattered, which is interesting. When you read the story in the Apocrypha, towards the end, you'll see King Ahasuerus actually make this a commanded festival for all of his provinces to show up at. So not only do you have this just being something that Queen Esther and Mordecai wanted Israel, Judah, to remember annually, but the king actually said, I want all 127 provinces to remember what Yahweh has done for his people. And in those 127 provinces, you actually have the scattered Israel. You have Israel in the 10 northern tribes are scattered among the nations, and that was the then known world at that point. He pretty much had conquered the then known world. So scattered Israel would have been in those 127 provinces. Interesting to note that also Purim was that the king commanded that it would be the Arabs. It would be everyone was supposed to mark this day. And the reason why, and the king actually says the reason why, is so that, not so you can dress up in Halloween costumes and run around mimicking Halloween, but so that you would remember, his people, his provinces would remember that Yahweh came through for his people. So number 4, it has prophetic implications. The parallels between Purim and Passover are stunning, and other things are completely stunning. I mean, just for an example, and if you go ahead and watch Jim Staley's 2014 video on teaching on Purim, you will see some of these. You have Vashti, who represents the rebellious bride, the first bride, who would, she did not want to allow the king to show her off to the nation. So, it's something that I believed a long time ago, was that the king had actually asked her to show up naked with just her crown on, but that is not actually, that's not actually what happened. As far as I understand, it was him wanting to show off how he had adorned her. So she would have had a full, huge, heavy dress with tons of tons of gems on it and stuff, and her incredible crown. So the idea was he wanted the nations to see, he wanted to show the nations and say, this is how I adorn my queen. This is my splendor. This is like, this is how I, lavish on my queen. I'm such a lavisher of good things. I want you to see how I, what I do for my queen. Another parallel would be Esther represents the obedient bride. So she's like the second bride who allowed the king to show her off to the nations. So she actually wanted to know, what is it that you want? And I will do it. Haggai represents the Ruach HaKodesh, as we talked earlier. Haman represents Hasatan in the story, who is going to hold Yehovah to a legal thing, in the sense of, once the decree of death was made, it couldn't be revoked, and, Hasatan is going to hold Yehovah to a legal document, basically, that says, no, they don't have the right to go in because of this. Some other things I talk about, in the stuff that I've written on this, and I'll probably talk about it next week, but that basically they were under the threat of death, or that death decree was hanging over their head just because of who they were. Just because they were, it wasn't because of what they had done, each individual person, it was because of who they were, their nationality. And we as sinners, humans, have sinned, and so just because of who we are, because we have broken the law and we are humans, we deserve to die. So that death decree hangs over our head. But there's the decree of death, but there's also the decree of life, which I think is just stunning to look at the parallels here between the stories of, Queen Esther and our story, is like the decree of life. So you have this decree of death hanging there that says you are condemned to die, but then Mordecai and Queen Esther actually get to craft a new decree, because the king couldn't get rid of this decree of death, remember? But they get to craft a new decree, and right next to this death decree is a decree of life. So they could choose life. I mean, it's just stunning. You just get into the story and you find the parallels, and it's completely stunning. One other thing here, a parallel, is that those closest to the king knew the king's law. So knowing the king's law and being able to interpret it was going to get you closest to the king. Okay, what does Yeshua said, like Jim Staley mentioned, Yeshua says that, those that teach and practice the ways of Yehovah are going to be called great in the kingdom of heaven, but those that break even the littlest of these commandments are going to be called least in the kingdom. So if you want to be great in the kingdom, you must know his law. You must know and be able to interpret the king's law. So the king asked his advisors, what is, I know there's this law, what does it mean? And they could interpret it for him. Number 5, it holds the topic that Yehovah wants to talk to us about at this time of year. So how do we prepare to come before the king? To remember that Yehovah will destroy enemies for us. So there's 2 things that I see that Yehovah really wants to talk about during this time of year as we prepare to go into Rosh Hashanah and the spring feast. He wants to talk to us about how to prepare to come before the king. He wants us to remember that he has destroyed our enemies and that he will destroy them in the future for good. Number 6, the true Purim, not the mimic of Halloween, not the false Purim, not the one that everybody's like not wanting to celebrate Purim because it mimics Halloween. I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about restoring the true Purim. So the true Purim is provision for us. It's something we can offer our children, in the middle of this time, in this dark time of year still, in the middle of winter. You can offer this to them and begin to walk them into learning about the heart and how to prepare to meet the king. And number 7, Queen Esther shows us how to walk as Ezer Kenegdos and throw a banquet in the face of danger. This is like what we talked about last week. I think this is incredible. That this is, for me, the heart of this story, at least where it gets most personal for me, is watching an example of a Ezer Kenegdo throwing a banquet with the death sentence over her head and just putting everything out there on the line. She brings she doesn't hide her beauty, she brings it forward into this moment of life or death. And so every year we get to practice this. Every year we get to practice, being humble, fasting and praying, and repenting for ourselves and for Israel, and considering, the provision of Yehovah and how he has come through for his people, and going into it with surety and faith, but how do you do that in the middle of hard? How do you throw a banquet in the middle of hard? So she's got all this and honor, and she's pulling out the stops to throw a big feast. And frankly, that's what we're doing. Ladies, families, all year long, you have all these feasts, all these festivals. You have these annual high Shabbats, you have a weekly Shabbat, you have new moons, you have the 2 winter festivals, and you're going to throw your heart into celebrating these festivals all year long. This is the rhythm that I keep talking about. And this is the job of a priest, is to walk this out, to do the rhythm, to invite people into this feast, to come in and during Purim, you invite them to come in to feast, but you invite them into learning how to prepare their heart to meet the King. And I really think that as the world kind of like crashes around us and the end of the age shows up, it is showing up, it is here, as the telos comes on us at some point when Papa is ready for that. I think the thing that's going to set us apart is going to be the fact that we'll be feasting in the middle of the chaos. I mean, this calm, beautiful, centering, moment of the feast where we sacrifice to our Elohim, we focus on Him, and we focus on what He wants to talk about at that moment. I mean, while this chaos is going around all around us, we're throwing feasts, we're throwing huge banquets in the middle of chaos, in the middle of the world going down and everybody freaking out and having, a ton of stress, a ton of fear, and we're going to be like focused and solid because we're following Him in this rhythm. And so I think we'll be feasting and finding our joy in the midst of, the pagans running around with their heads cut off, kind of like a chicken, a chicken with their head cut off kind of thing. And we don't have to be like that because we have Yehovah, we have this job to do for Him, and we're going to throw feasts. And I think with Purim, it's like I love it because I just look at Queen Esther's example, and I do like she did. Is people will be throwing Him feasts as the end of the ages, no matter what.